I never thought I'd be putting this down. But here it is. This is how my own brother stabbed me in the back, big time. How he totally took advantage of my generosity, made me feel small, and figured he could just walk all over me. Well, he had another thing coming. Seriously, he really messed up. Let's rewind to the start with my brother, Jake. He and I have always had this tricky dynamic. We were tight as little kids, but once we got older, everything flipped. He turned into the family's superstar, the one who was always perfect. Our folks would heap praise on him, let his screw-ups slide, and basically treat him like royalty. Meanwhile, I was stuck being the responsible one, the one making all the sacrifices, the one who had to be understanding whenever Jake pulled some selfish stunt. But even with all that, I still cared about him. I still tried to be a decent sibling, and that's the reason. When he dropped the news about getting hitched, I stepped up in a major way. Jake and his soon-to-be wife, Emily, had this whole fairy tale wedding mapped out. Only one snag. They were way short on cash. The place, the food, the fancy stuff, her dress, the flowers. It was all miles beyond their means. I could see how freaked out they were. And even with our messed up past, I felt like doing something kind. So, I made them a proposition. I told Jake I'd handle the wedding costs, consider it my present. Not something to pay back, not a shared thing. I'd foot the whole bill. It was a ton of dough, but I was like, whatever. He's my bro. It's a huge milestone. If I can help him out, why the heck not? Jake was ecstatic. Emily was bawling with happiness. My parents were gushing about how amazing I was. It felt awesome. It was like, for once, people actually saw my worth. But then, bam, everything went sideways. The wedding prep kept rolling, and I started picking up on something weird. Every time I'd ask about what I was supposed to do at the wedding, I'd get these super vague replies. At first, I brushed it off, thinking they were just swamped. But as more time passed, I started getting this awful feeling. Then, like a month before the wedding, I get this text from Emily. Not even a phone call, just this cold, lifeless text. Hey, just wanted to let you know we're going for a small, close-knit wedding. Hope that's cool. Thanks again for everything. I read that thing 3 times. Sure, I was missing something. I wasn't getting an invite to a wedding I was bankrolling. I instantly tried calling Jake. No answer. So I shot him a text, asking what the deal was. Hours went by before he finally hit me back. Look, we just don't think you gel with the wedding's atmosphere. It's not a personal attack. Hope you're not ticked off. Ticked off? I was seeing red. My own brother had the nerve to use my cash, throw his dream bash, and then act like I wasn't worthy of being there? I needed some straight answers, so I rang up our parents, figuring they'd be furious. But when my mom got on the line, her words made my gut clench. Oh, sweetie, just let it slide. It's their big moment. You don't want to cause any drama, right? I was floored. They were in on it. They knew. And they didn't give a damn. That's when it hit me. I was flying solo. And that's when I made up my mind. If they wanted a wedding excluding me, fine. They weren't getting a wedding, period. I sat there, glued to my phone, my thoughts going a mile a minute. I'd watched Jake and Emily obsess over this wedding for months, giving my 2 cents when they asked, paying deposits, and making sure everything was spot on for them. I'd bent over backward to give them the most incredible day ever. And now, after all that, I was getting the boot. Not just that, but the way they brushed me off, like I was some random person instead of family, made me furious. I could have understood if there were money problems or space limits, but I was the one paying for the whole shebang. There was zero justification. I needed a breather to wrap my head around what just went down. I tossed my phone aside and just sat there, quiet, for ages. At first, I felt wounded, like I'd been punched in the gut. But as time crawled by, that hurt morphed into something else. Something edgier. They assumed they could play me. They figured they could get away with it. They were dead wrong. That instant, I knew I wasn't going to let this go, but I wasn't about to lose it, or try to change their minds. Nope, that's what they'd expect. Instead, I was going to play it cool. I started by pulling together all the info I had. Since I'd covered everything, I still had the receipts, the venue, the food, the flowers, the pics. I'd been the main contact for most of these guys. And since the cash had come from my bank, that meant one crucial thing. Everything was still under my name. A slow, deliberate scheme started brewing in my head. The wedding was still weeks away. That gave me a window. Time to make sure that when the big day rolled around, things wouldn't exactly go as Jake and Emily had envisioned. But first, I had to do some snooping. I hopped on social media, checking out their posts about the wedding. And there it was. Their small and close-knit guest list wasn't so tiny after all. Tons of people were commenting about how pumped they were to be there. Buddies, distant relatives, even work friends. So, I didn't fit the vibe. But all these folks did. That was all the proof I needed. I took a long breath, opened my emails, and started dialing. First up, the venue. I got the venue on the line. A super polite lady answered. "Hello. This is Willowcrest Events. How can I help?" I kept my voice steady and businesslike. "Hi. I'm calling about the wedding for Jake and Emily on the 17th. I'm actually the one who set it up, and I need to talk about some adjustments." "Sure thing," she said. "What adjustments are we talking about?" I let a beat pass, letting the suspense build in my head. "Actually, I need to call the whole thing off." There was a brief pause before she replied. "Oh, okay. Just to double-check, you're the one who paid and signed the agreement, right?" "That's me," I confirmed. "The agreement's under my name, and since I won't be there, I've decided to pull my backing. I get there's a fee for canceling, but that's cool." She sounded hesitant. "Well, since you're the one on the contract, you can definitely cancel, but the deposit's gone." "Totally fine," I told her. "Just go ahead and process the cancellation. And please make sure any updates on this come straight to me. I don't want anyone else messing with things." She said okay, and after a few minutes of confirming, the venue was officially off. I hung up, already feeling this wave of "I got this" wash over me. But I wasn't stopping there. Next, the food. Jake and Emily had this crazy fancy menu planned. Multiple dishes, booze flowing, and this gorgeous cake. They'd been bragging about it for ages. But, once again, I was the one holding the checkbook. I called up the catering folks and went through the same routine. "Hey, I'm calling about an event I booked for Jake and Emily. Sadly, things have shifted, and I need to cancel the catering." The lady on the other end asked if I was positive. "We're super close to the date, so there'll be a fee." "I get it," I cut in smoothly. "Just cancel everything." After a couple of minutes, it was a done deal. The caterers were officially off the hook. 2 down. I grinned. But I wasn't calling it quits yet. The flowers, the photographer, the decorations. I went through the whole list, one by one, axing everything. Each call felt like I was grabbing back a piece of my self-respect, like I was undoing every bit of manipulation Jake and Emily had tried to throw my way. By the time I was finished, the entire wedding had been stripped down to nothing but an empty space. A space they couldn't even get into anymore. Now, all that was left was to chill and wait. Jake and Emily had zero clue what was about to hit them. The days leading up to the wedding were strangely calm. Jake and Emily hadn't tried to contact me at all, which told me one thing. They were totally in the dark about their wedding being wiped out. I gotta admit, a tiny part of me was wondering when they'd catch on. The venue, the food, the decorations. Surely someone had pinged them by now, right? But nope. I wasn't about to give them a heads up. I wasn't going to drop a single clue. Instead, I waited. Then, the night before the wedding, my phone buzzed. It was my mom. I thought about letting it go to voicemail, but my curiosity won. I answered with a casual, "Hey, Mom." The first thing I heard was mayhem, yelling, freaked out voices, my mom's sharp, breathless tone. "What the heck did you do?" I leaned back in my chair, a smug grin spreading across my face. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Don't act clueless," she snapped. "Jake just called me. He went to check on the venue, and everything's gone. No decorations, no tables, no setup, zip." I faked surprise. "Wow, that's bizarre. Maybe he should hit up whoever actually organized the wedding." Silence. Then she spoke again, her voice lower this time. "You canceled everything, didn't you?" I didn't even skip a beat. Of course I did. I paid for it. It was in my name. And since I wasn't on the guest list, I figured, why should I pay for something I'm not welcome at? There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "You destroyed your brother's wedding." "No," I corrected, my voice steady. "He destroyed it the second he decided to ditch me after taking advantage of me. I just made sure he dealt with the fallout." Another voice cut through the chaos in the background. Jake, yelling at someone, furious. "What do you mean we have no food? The caterer canceled? What the hell is happening?" I could practically hear his world imploding. I glanced at the clock. The wedding was supposed to kick off in less than 12 hours. Guests would be showing up soon, expecting a fancy event. But they'd be walking into a big, fat zero. I almost felt bad. Almost. My mom was still sputtering in disbelief. You really went through with this?" "Yep." I said simply. And I'm not sorry. Before she could say another word, I hung up. Now, all that remained was to see how the train wreck played out. The morning of the wedding dawned, and I could already picture the sheer panic unfolding at the venue. Jake and Emily must have shown up, expecting a perfect setup, only to find a cold, empty space. No chairs, no flowers, no food, no tunes. Just a pricey, hollow room with nothing inside. I made myself some coffee and scrolled through my phone, waiting. And then, like clockwork, the messages started flooding in. Jake texted, "What did you do? You wrecked everything. I hope you're satisfied." Emily texted, "You're unbelievably selfish. You knew how much this day meant to us." I took my sweet time before replying, sipping my coffee as I typed back a single message. "I wasn't invited, remember? Didn't seem like you wanted me around, so I just went along with it." Silence. For a while, at least. Then my phone rang. Click. I let it ring. And ring. And ring. Finally, after the fourth try, I picked up. "Let me guess," I said dryly. "Something's not quite right with the wedding." His voice was trembling with anger. "Do you have any clue what you've caused? People are showing up in a few hours. There's nothing here. No food, no chairs, no flowers." "Oh wow, that sounds awful," I said, feigning concern. "Maybe you should talk to the person who actually planned the wedding." "Oh wait, that was me." He let out a sharp breath. "You did this intentionally." "Of course I did," I said. "You expected me to pay for everything and then just accept being thrown aside like I was garbage? You used me, Jake. And you thought I'd just roll over." I could hear Emily's voice in the background, panicked, talking to someone else. "Can we get another caterer? Anything." A second voice answered, "Not on such short notice. Everything's booked solid." I could practically feel the blood draining from her face. Jake's voice dropped to a desperate whisper. "Please, we can make this right. If we just get the venue back, maybe we can." I cut him off. The venue was my contract, remember? And they're fully booked for months. So yeah, that's not going to happen. He let out a strained breath, and for the first time, there was something in his voice that hadn't been there before, pure panic. I let that silence hang in the air, relishing the moment. Then, just as I was about to hang up, I gave him one final parting shot. "Next time, don't screw over people who actually give a damn about you." And then, I hung up. But the story wasn't finished yet. Because what came next was even more satisfying. I sat back, my fingers still hovering over the phone screen, a feeling of contentment spreading through me. For the first time in ages, I felt like I was calling the shots. Jake and Emily's little world was about to come crashing down, and I was going to watch it all unfold from the sidelines, knowing I'd played my part. But the real chaos started to kick in as the morning went on. I started getting messages from friends and family members who had been invited to the wedding. "Aunt Karen, 8:05 a.m. What the heck is going on? I just got to the venue, and it's like a ghost town." "Uncle Ray, 8:12 a.m. Hey, we got here early for the wedding. There's no one here. Did they call it off? What's happening?" The more I read, the more the weight of the situation hit me. It wasn't just Jake and Emily who were affected. This was spiraling out of their control, and people were starting to gossip. I had to admit, a part of me felt a little smug. But that feeling quickly shifted as I realized the scale of the disaster. All of their friends, their family. None of them had any idea this was coming. I started to feel the tiniest twinge of guilt. These weren't just random people. These were folks I knew, people who had traveled, people who had taken time off work to celebrate the wedding. Sure, Jake and Emily had treated me like dirt, but was this really fair to the other guests? Then again, I couldn't help but remember how they had treated me. How Emily had scoffed when I suggested I be part of the planning. How Jake had made remarks about me not fitting the vibe of the wedding. They deserved to feel this. I checked my phone again, and the messages kept pouring in. Aunt Karen texted, "They're trying to salvage it. They said the caterers are on their way now, but the venue is still bare." "What's the deal?" Uncle Ray texted, "Everyone is starting to bail. No one knows what's going on." I couldn't help it. I had to respond. I replied, "I heard the wedding was going amazingly well. Such a bummer. But hey, I'm sure it'll all work out. Maybe they'll scrounge up some food or a chair somewhere." It was childish, I knew. But it was so satisfying to watch the mess ripple through the family. That's when I started to realize something. This wasn't just about getting back at Jake and Emily. This was about something deeper, something that had been festering for years. The more I reflected, the more I realized how much of my life I'd spent tolerating their selfishness. The more I thought about all I had done for them, only for them to completely dismiss me at the first chance. And now, they were facing the music. But the cherry on top was still to come. The day dragged on. I kept glued to my phone, watching the disaster unfold from the comfort of my place. The messages kept rolling in from family, and at first, they were all full of confusion. But soon, the tone shifted. Aunt Karen texted, "I'm hearing whispers that the wedding is officially kaput. No catering, no setup, everything just vanished." Uncle Ray texted, "I think they've scrapped the whole thing. Everyone's heading home. This is insane. Is this for real? I couldn't help but smirk at how quickly things were unraveling. The thought of Jake and Emily having to explain this to everyone, how it was supposed to be the best day of their lives and now it was a full-blown catastrophe, was incredibly satisfying. But as the day wore on, something unexpected started happening. Jake and Emily's calls became more frequent, more frantic. At first, I ignored them. But then, I saw the desperate text from Emily. Emily texted, "Please, just tell me you didn't cancel everything. I'll beg you. I'll do anything." Her tone was raw, pleading. She wasn't the smug, self-righteous Emily I knew anymore. Now, she was just someone desperate for a lifeline. But why should I throw her one? Why should I be the one to clean up the mess that was entirely of their making? Still, I didn't answer right away. I just let her stew in her panic. Then, about an hour later, Jake texted me. Jake texted, "We're getting hitched at City Hall today. We need your help with the venue and food. I'm sorry for everything I said. Please, you're the only one who can fix this now." The irony wasn't lost on me. They literally kicked me out of the wedding weeks ago, and now they were begging me to mop up their mess. I could feel the tension building in my chest. Was I really going to just let them scramble around, realizing the full weight of their mistake? Or was it time for me to finally seize the upper hand? I couldn't resist. I replied, "It's a little late for that, don't you think? Maybe you should have treated me like family instead of some second-rate guest you could toss aside." Silence. No response. And then, just as I was about to close my phone, the call came in. Jake's voice was quieter this time, almost defeated. "Look, we're sorry. We're really sorry. But the venue won't let us rebook it. And there's no one else to turn to for the catering. Please, please help us." I could hear the panic in his voice, but there was something else, too. Something I hadn't anticipated. They were desperate. But so was I. As I listened to Jake's shaky voice, I felt a tug of something unfamiliar, a sense of power. Here he was, pleading with me for help, after everything they put me through, after all the dismissive comments, the exclusion, the way they treated me as though I were invisible. Part of me wanted to hang up, walk away, and leave them to face the consequences of their actions. They deserved it, didn't they? They had been selfish, manipulative, and ungrateful. And now they were finally feeling the sting of their own choices. But there was something else, something darker that I couldn't ignore. I had always been the one to clean up the messes they made, always the one who gave, without getting anything back. I had spent years being the quiet one, the one who didn't rock the boat, who kept my feelings bottled up. But this time, I wasn't going to fix their mess. Not unless I got something in return. "Jake," I said slowly, my voice measured, cold. "I'll help, but you're going to owe me. Big time. And I'm not talking about the money you promised me." There was a long pause. What do you mean?" His voice was low, almost too afraid to ask. "I mean," I said, letting the weight of my words settle, "you're going to have to make things right. No more treating me like a nobody. No more excluding me. No more pretending I'm not important to this family. You're going to owe me respect from now on. And you're going to make it clear to everyone that I'm not just the one you use when things go wrong." There was silence again. I could almost hear the wheels turning in Jake's head, as if he were weighing the value of his pride against the very real situation he was in. Finally, he spoke. I can do that. I'll tell everyone. Just please help us. We need you." That was all I needed. The satisfaction of knowing they were cornered, that they had no choice but to admit they needed me. "I'll get things together," I said, a sense of finality in my voice. "But remember this moment. You don't get to treat people like trash and expect them to always pick up the pieces." I hung up, feeling a rush of satisfaction. The venue was ready to be set up again. But now, there were terms. And the real payoff was going to come when I got to see the look on their faces when they realized what had truly happened. But as I prepared to head over, one final message came through. Emily texted, "Please, we'll be forever grateful. Please make this right." I paused before responding, taking a moment to savor the power I now had over them. I replied, "You'll be grateful when I say you will be. See you at City Hall." With that, I left my apartment, ready to make my way to the wedding. The stage was set, and now, it was time for the final act. But there was still one thing I hadn't expected: how this would all end. When I arrived at City Hall, the atmosphere was far from what you'd expect for a wedding. There was a sense of awkwardness hanging in the air, as if everyone knew something wasn't right but couldn't quite put their finger on it. The small crowd gathered in the lobby looked uncomfortable, standing in clusters, whispering among themselves. Jake and Emily were standing by the front desk, looking more like two people who had just been through a war than a couple about to get married. They saw me as soon as I entered, their faces lighting up in a mixture of relief and nervousness. "Thank you for coming," Emily said, her voice shaky. "We really appreciate it." She looked at me, almost pleading, like I was some sort of savior. Jake, ever the prideful one, didn't say much. He just nodded, his eyes avoiding mine, as if he couldn't quite bring himself to admit how badly they had messed up. I walked toward them slowly, taking in the tension that filled the room. There were no flowers, no grand decorations, just a sterile room with a few chairs and a judge standing at the front. It felt more like a courtroom than a wedding venue. I approached the small group of guests who had been invited. They all gave me tentative smiles, but no one was exactly thrilled to be there. Everyone had expected a wedding fit for a celebration, but instead, they were left in an uncomfortable limbo, unsure of what was going on or why everything had been cancelled. As I took my seat, I couldn't help but feel a little glee in the pit of my stomach. This was it. Jake and Emily had built their whole day around their carefully crafted image of the perfect wedding, and now it was crumbling in front of them. The ceremony began. The judge went through the usual formalities, but no one was truly paying attention. Emily kept glancing at me, hoping for some sign that everything was going to turn out okay. Jake, on the other hand, seemed to be stewing in his own frustration, no doubt cursing the day he had ever pushed me away. But then, just as the vows were being exchanged, something unexpected happened. The door to the room opened, and a familiar face stepped in, the catering manager from the venue where the original wedding was supposed to take place. Everyone turned to look, and for a brief moment, there was complete silence. Jake's face drained of color. Emily's mouth went dry. "What are you doing here?" Jake asked, his voice cold. The catering manager walked to the front and handed Emily a large envelope. "I think you'll want to see this," he said, his tone flat. Emily tore open the envelope, her hands trembling. As she pulled out the contents, her face shifted from confusion to shock, and then to rage. It was a cancellation notice. A legal document from the venue, showing that their booking was, in fact, voided. The contract had been terminated due to unpaid fees, and a substantial fine had been added for the breach. The catering manager spoke up again. "You're lucky I came here to let you know. You should have paid attention to your obligations." It was at that moment, standing in front of a room full of people who had seen it all unravel, that Emily finally broke. "I thought we were going to get married today," she whispered, the realization sinking in. Jake's face turned crimson. He stepped toward the catering manager, his anger flaring. "This is your fault. You were supposed to keep everything together." But the manager didn't flinch. "You should have been more responsible. But hey, I guess that's what happens when you treat people like they're disposable." I watched the scene unfold, feeling every ounce of satisfaction creep in. Jake and Emily had been so sure of themselves, so sure that they could manipulate everything around them without consequence. And now, here they were, with the walls closing in, their perfect day crumbling to dust. But the most satisfying part? They had no one to blame but themselves. As the catering manager walked out, I caught Emily's eyes. There was a moment of quiet between us. She looked defeated, her smile gone, her confidence shattered. For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered everything that had led up to this moment. And oh, they didn't deserve my sympathy. They didn't deserve anything. The judge, sensing the tension, awkwardly cleared his throat and finished the ceremony as quickly as he could. No one clapped when they were declared married. In fact, the guests filed out as soon as the words were spoken, leaving Jake and Emily to face the consequences of their actions. I walked out of the room slowly, my heart pounding. The day had been a roller coaster of emotions, but in the end, I knew I had made the right choice. I had finally taken control of my own life and had made them pay for their disrespect. So I stepped outside. I couldn't help but smile to myself. It had been the perfect revenge. And as for Jake and Emily, they would never forget the lesson they learned that day.